Okay, sure, sure. Rachit, it's over to you now. You can, yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Is my screen visible? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me actually begin by giving you the actual demo of the final application. So here's what the user. Are you all able to see the FabChat window, right?
This is, I can see.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is what the user sees. So the application. So the name of the application is FabChat. So let us first register. So it will ask for your email. So let me just put this is my email r1@ashoka.edu.in and I'm going to register this. Okay. So now it says that registration is successful and check your email inbox for password. So at this moment, the application will send the password to the user's email ID. So right now I've disabled that since we are doing a demo. So the default password I've put at 0000. So let me just enter that. So 0000, and then I'm going to do a login. Okay, so now we have entered the dashboard. So as you can see, we have a message typing window here. We can type a message, and as professor mentioned, that the key logic of the program is that the message will remain anonymous unless 50% of the users flag it. So let me just put a hello message, and now I'm going to post this message. So it says message posted successfully. I'm gonna go back. Now I have an option to see all the messages. So let me just hit that. So I can see my hello message, and I can see one. This is your message ID. I go back. Now I can use any message ID to flag it or to query it. So let me query the message. I put the message ID 1. So I get the hello message, which was referenced by the message ID 1. Now I can try to flag it, but it's going to fail because the user cannot flag its own message. So let me anyway just try. So fail to flag message, whatever. And of course we have this users count. It shows the number of users that are currently registered in the system. So right now it's 1. So at this moment I'll log out and I'm going to register another user. r2@ashoka.edu.in. So successful. I'm going to log in. User default password. Okay, so this is what R2 sees. So let's see all the messages. So R2 says the message that was posted by the user 1, but it doesn't have any idea about the identity of the user. That is its email ID. So right now it's not getting displayed. That is fine. So let us post some message. Welcome message. Successful. Let me see all the messages. So welcome, and the message I did got was 3. Okay, fine. Now let me. Now as you can see, there's the user count has been increased to 2. Now we're going to log out and register another user. 3 at ashoka.edu.in. Successful. Now R3 will log in. And R3 hits see all messages. So it says sees the hello message and welcome message, and again these are anonymous. We do not have the email ID yet. So let us post a COVID message. Message processed successfully. Let's see all messages. So now we have 3 messages, and let us see when users try to flag this COVID message. So right now the user count is 3, so 50% of it will be 1.5 rounded up to 2. So 2 users need to flag the COVID message, and then the identity of the poster will be revealed. So let us log out. Now let us log in using R1. Okay, R1 has logged in. Now R1 is going to hit see all messages. Now R1 sees these messages and it does not like this COVID message. So now R1 is going to flag it. So R1 sees its message ID, that is number 5. R1 goes back. It enters message ID 5 and then flags this message. Message flagged successfully. So now this COVID message has received one number of flags, but that is still not enough to reveal the ID. So let's see. So see, the COVID message is still anonymous. It needs another flag. So now let us log out. Now R1 will log in. So R1 hits see all messages. R1 will see this COVID message and again it doesn't like it, so it will flag it. R1 enters 5 and then clicks flag message. Now message has been flagged. Now at this point the COVID message has received the required number of flags, and if someone does a query now, it should be able to see the email ID of the poster. So let's see. Now this COVID message, we have the email ID of the poster appended to it. Okay. So this was the application. Now we can
At
get to the
this
techniques.
point, yeah,
Yes, Professor.
thanks, Rachit. At this point, anybody have question about this application? So you see, 3 users were there. All of them basically posted one message each, and all of them were anonymous. And now the third message, the other 2 users didn't like it, so they flagged it. After the first flagging, the message was still anonymous. But after the second flagging, now it has received 2 flags, which is more than the 50% of the total users. So therefore, as per the rule, the message has to be non-anonymous now, and the poster's identity should be revealed, and that is what has happened. So all of this is this entire rule is basically written in a chain code. Yeah, so that's that Rachit is going to show everything. But now you know the application. Any question at this point, and then we go into the chain code. Okay, so then I think Rachit, you can just go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so this is the doc I have shared with you. So I will quickly uh, give a summary of this Fabric installation. So first of all, the important thing to note is that we are using the Fabric version 1.4. So make sure you use exactly this version. And then I have also provided some documentation links which will help you in developing your application. So for the installation part, the operating system prerequisite is any Unix based, so you can use Linux or Mac OS. And for Windows user, I would suggest you dual boot Linux. Virtual machine is not recommended because it will be very slow. And then you have to install some tools and all, which I've given the link here. But the important one is Docker and Docker Compose. So you will have to install this. It will be used to create standard environments, for building, for running your applications in chain code. So the links are here. And again, as Professor said, you can use any general purpose language. I have used Node.js, JavaScript. I would say that this is the easiest one to code into, but you can also use Go and all. So you have to install Go if you want to do that, and then some other prerequisites. And this is the actual script that downloads all the Fabric related files. Be sure of this version. As I said, it's version 1.4. And then I have given you some commands which you can execute to just double check if everything is working fine. So you can run all of this. Okay. So now let's get into the FabChat. That is the name of the application. So basically, FabChat has 3 important components. First one is obviously your network part, and the second will be your client application code, and the third one is the chain code, the vital logic. So let me just start with the network part. So when you download this Fabric on your computer, you will see this folder being created, a Fabric samples folder. When you enter this, you will see a bunch of folders and files. Okay, so this folder, this Fabric samples, comes with many different inbuilt network configuration that you can use for testing. So right now, FabChat uses this a sample network called basic network. So the directory is here. This is the sample network that we'll be using, and of course you will need FabChat related files. So I have put a link here. You can download the FabChat zip, and what you have to do is you just have to copy the content of the zip and just paste and merge in the fabric samples directly. Okay. Now when you do that, you will have these directories of interest, chain code. So out of all of these directories, only 3 directories are of interest: your network part, your chain code part, and of course your client application part. Okay. So as I said, we'll be using a sample network called basic network. It's the easiest one to understand. So uh, it comprises of one orderer, one certificate authority,
It is
and one
asking
organization.
for access. Excuse me. It is asking to download this FabSet. It is asking for access.
Okay, let me give you the permission. Now can you try to access it?
Yeah.
Okay. And fine. So one organization, and the name of this organization will be org1, and it will maintain one peer named peer0. So one order, one CA, one organization maintaining one peer. Okay. That was our network. Pretty basic. Now I want you to cd into this fabric samples folder and just change directly to basic network. So now we are in the basic network here. Okay. Now, since this is the first time, we don't have to go through this tear down. But if you've run through this tutorial before, when you run through this tutorial, make sure you do a tear down. Basically, it gives you a fresh starting state. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove some old cryptographic material and some configuration transactions. So let me just show you what do I mean. We're going to emptying out these 2 folders. So let me use the terminal. Just copy paste these commands. It's not copying, so let me just basically empty these folders. Okay. So now we have removed the old cryptographic material. Now we have to generate new cryptographic material, and of course this is the command for that. But before executing this, just let me briefly tell you what it does. So it will take as input a file known as cryptoconfig.yml. And where is this file located? Go back to basic network, and this is your cryptoconfig YML file. This is how it looks like. As you can see, we have some definition for the order organization, name and domain, the peer organization, name and domain, and the number of peers you want to know. So chances are that you don't need to touch this file. So just let us leave that. And now we're going to use this CryptoGen2. It's a binary. And where is this binary? We'll go back. All the binaries are in the bin folder. So go to bin, and we are going to use this CryptoGen binary to generate cryptographic materials. Okay. So this is the command for that. Let me just copy this, and I'll put this and execute. Okay. So this is done. So now I should have the cryptographic material generated. to see, you go to basic network, you go to crypto config, and here you will have the necessary cryptographic material generated. You can look into these directories. You will have the certificate and private keys here. Okay, so that was the crypto part. Now we have to generate some channel artifacts. So there's a Genesis block for the orderer, and we have to generate a channel configuration transaction. So let's see what it does. So it takes as input a file known as config.tx.yml. Where is this file? So again, it's in the basic network folder. This is the file that we can use it. We open it, you'll see some definitions: organization, orderer, organization 1, ranker peers, application defaults, order defaults, address, order type, the algorithm that you're going to use, Solo or Kafka, you can put here, and some batch timeout, batch size, match message count. So you can look into this. And again, chances are that for developing your application, you don't need to touch these files. So let's move ahead. Okay.
Have you
And now
used
we
some cryptographic algorithm to this for the anonymity
sorry.
in the code? Have you used any logic or concept for maintaining the anonymity?
I don't.
No,
We'll see.
no.
We'll see.
This is, I mean, these are basically going to be required for any application that you develop. So at this point, no cryptographic algorithms are used basically towards the anonymity. Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
See
But
what happens.
it
See
means
what
the
happens.
identity is getting saved somewhere.
Uh-huh.
The identity is getting saved.
Yeah, yeah. At this point, as I said, identity is of course saved in the database. So if you have access to the database, I mean any peer database, you will actually know the identities of every message that is posted. But if a client who is not having access to the database and it's just querying the database, then it will not see the identity of the poster unless there are enough flags. Okay, so that's one thing. But so you can again, if you want to hide even identity of the poster from the peers also, then you can actually make use cryptography from the client side. But that is not the question here. We just wanted to execute you that
Yeah.
the rules are maintained. Now
So
coming
in
to
the
these
same code,
cryptographic materials, these are required for authorizing every transaction. Say for example, I make a, as a client, I make a transaction to the network, then you see peer should know that it is coming from the authorized client. So
okay.
in blockchain network, every node, be it a peer node, be it a orderer, be it a client, whenever they make a transaction, they always sign their transaction. So they need crypto materials, like they need certificates, crypto certificates. They should have access to the signing algorithm. Okay, so that this is just to set up those things. Okay.
Okay. So we'll be using crypto txgen tool, and again you can find this tool in your binary folder. So this is the tool. So let me just execute these two commands. Okay, so it says writing Genesis block and all done. So after executing this, you can go back to basic network. You can go to config, and you'll see a Genesis block, a file written there. Okay. Now we're going to do a channel configuration transaction. And the important point to note is that this is the first time we are providing the name of our channel. So the name of our channel is going to be my channel henceforth. One cannot change the channel name after this. Okay. So writing new channel transaction. So I have this channel transaction. Okay, so now we have generated the channel artifacts, but you have to do this one important step, that every time you generate a fresh crypto material, you need to change this CA server CA key file in a file known as Docker Composer.yml with new key from this location. Okay, so we're going to copy the new key. So we go to crypto config, we go to peer, we go to org1, we go to CA, and this is a secret key. I say to rename, copy the name of the file, go back to basic network, and there'll be a file known as docker compose.yml. So this is the field we're going to replace. So simply just remove the old key, paste the new key, and hit save. So now we have saved the new key. Okay. Now we're going to start the network. So this is the command that you'll be using. So it takes as input docker compose.yml, this file. So let's see what this file is. So this is the file. So you can see I have this services defined. So we have this CA, and of course the container name and the order and the peer and the database, the world state, this command line interface. So in total, Docker will fire up 5 containers. And of course, this Docker Compose is going to use, which we installed as the part of prerequisite. So in total, we'll have 5 of these containers running. So I'm not going to execute this because I have already the network running. But you can, of course, do a Docker PS after that. And you'll see, right now it's 6, but you'll see 5. You'll see 5 of these. The 6th one is the chain code container, and it will be started later. Okay. So now the next step will be to create the channel, and note that I'm providing the same channel ID that I used for in this step when I generated the channel configuration transaction. So this is the command for it, and the important part is here that I'm specifying the name of my channel. So this is important. So when you execute this, the channel name, my channel, will be created. Okay. So the next step will be to, of course, join the peer. Since we have one peer only, so we'll have to join this peer to this channel. So this is the command for it, and you can execute this as it is. Okay. Now we have added peer to a channel. Now the next step will be to install the FabChat chain code on peer0, and of course this is the command for it. And the important part is that I'm providing the name of the chain code, FabChat. Now where is this file, I'll get to in the later part, but this is here you specify the name of your chain code, and the another part is that you also specify the language in which your chain code is written. So I've written it in JavaScript, so I'll provide Node here. If you have Python or Go, chances are that you have to provide that as an argument. Okay. Now the next step will be to instantiate chain code on my channel, and this step is going to take a bit of time, so be patient. The important part here is again the endorsement policy. So you specify your endorsement policy using this -p argument. So I've provided this org1 msp.member, org2 msp.member. So it means that endorsement from any member of the organization will suffice. But if you want to have, say, endorsement of one member from each organization, then you can put and here. But we have one organization and one peer, so it doesn't matter. So I'll put or. Okay. And then we're going to submit an init ledger transaction. So I won't get into the details of it here, but basically think of it as the first transaction that you can use to maybe initialize some global variables and all. So this is the command for it. Think of it like you have this constructors in general programming languages. So you can think of this as that. Now, after you have done till step number 10, now you can do a Docker PS. You can do a Docker PS. So earlier you were getting 5 containers. Now you'll get 6. The new one will be this, starting with dev peer0.org. So this is your chain code container. So in total, you should have 6 containers after executing these steps. Okay. Now, next part will be your the client application code. Before that, of course, it will be very cumbersome to execute all the steps to start the network. So I have provided the scripts here. So I'm going to tear down my network. So I'll have a fresh starting set. So the next step will be, of course, to start the network. So you can just fire up the script and it will bootstrap the entire network. So meanwhile, let's just let this get executed and let me talk about the client application code. Okay. So FabChat client applications, they're used to, you can use them to register some admins and users. And of course, they'll be used to interact with the chain code. So where are the FabChat client application code files? So it's there in this directory. Let me show you. So this is a fabric samples. You go to FabChat and it will contain your client application files. Since they're written in JavaScript, so they're in JavaScript folder. So you will see these files. Let me just go to this directory. Okay. So the files of interest, we have 4 files. For enrolling admin, for registering users, and for invoking and querying, which we will see later what do they do. So now the first step will be to, of course, cd into this directory, which I've done. And now we are going to install some dependencies. So you can execute this command npm install. I've already done that. Okay, so the number 1 step will be, of course, to enroll the admin, which will store the admin credentials in a wallet directory. So this is the command for it, node enroll admin.js. Let's quickly execute this. Okay, successfully enrolled admin user and imported into the wallet. So let's see, where is this wallet directory? It's here, wallet admin. So as you can see, I have the private key and public keys of this admin. Let me just confirm if the network has started. Okay, so the network, finally you should see this status 200. That means the network has started. And to double check, you can do docker ps and you will see 6 of these containers are done. Fine. So the network is starting and So now we're going to register 3 users, user 1, user 2, and user 3. So it will store the user credentials in wallet directory again. So let's quickly do that. So user 1 I register. Done. User 2 I do. And user 3 I do. So now I should have keys for these 3 users in my wallet directory. So let's see. Go to the wallet folder. So I have this credentials for all 3 users. Fine. Okay. Now the posting message part. So let's. This is how the command looks like. So we are going to use this invoke.js. Now create message will, I'll discuss this later, but think of it as your the transaction that you're doing. So it's a create message transaction, and of course it's going to take some arguments. So it's going to take a message text, it's going to take the user ID and the email of the user. So these are the example usages. So let's post 3 messages like we did earlier in the web demo of FabChat. So I'm going to post the same messages. Hello. Create message transaction has been submitted. Fine. Now I'm going to post a welcome message.
Rachit,
Yes, Professor.
can you show them the database also after the transactions?
Yes.
Is this configuration is common to all the application?
Sorry.
This configuration is common to all the application.
Which configuration?
For example, if I need five, not the users, 5 orders, and then PS if I want to increase the PFIR for certain applications. Because as of now you're showing for the fab.
I mean, you mean to say that you want to change these arguments into whatever you like?
No, not like that. Some other application. Instead of FabCar, if I want to go for other application.
Yeah, you will have to modify the files that I have put here.
Yeah, basic network files, all the files I have.
I mean, if you want to change the network configuration, then you'll have to modify the basic network.
Okay.
So you have to change these files according to your needs. So I have posted 3 messages. Now let me. Okay. So you can use this link to have a look at the state. So as you can see, you have 3 IDs, 3 message IDs posted. If you hit 0, so we're going to enter, we're going to talk about this when we talk about the asset, how the asset looks like. But as you can see, I have the message text hello here. Similarly for 2, we can have this COVID. So I have this messages written in the word state. Okay. Now, of course, you can do a query. So let me just query all messages. You can use this command. So I hit query all messages. Okay, transaction has been evaluated, and I can see all the transaction that has been posted. And of course, they do not have the email ID of the poster yet. Fine. Now, similarly, you can of course do query message by ID, and this is the command for that. You can execute this. And for flagging, let's do the same thing. Let's flag this COVID message with and it has message ID 2. And who are going to be flagging? The users 1 and user 2. So let's just do this. User 1 is flagged. If I do query, I should still not see the email ID, and yes, I do not see it. Fine. Now let user 2 flag it. So query. Let user 2 flag it. Now I do a query. Now I should see the email ID. Now I'm getting the email ID. Okay. So this is how the commands are executed on the client application side. The FabChat web demo was using exactly these commands to show the results. Okay. Okay. So two files are of interest in this client application part. That will be your invoke and query. They are mostly similar in structure, so I will just discuss one quickly. So the first line you'll see is that we're going to do some imports. We're going to import the two classes, file system wallet and gateway, and they will be imported from this Fabric network. And this Fabric network, this module was installed in your computer when you did the npm install as part of the prerequisite step. Okay. So here are the imports. Okay. Now we're going to use this file system wallet to create a wallet object, and these are the lines that you do that. So you can see, we create a file system based wallet for managing our identities. So these are the commands, and of course you have to connect to the network. So we'll be using the gateway class. So you create a new gateway object, and of course you connect to using this CCP and so what is the CCP? CCP is basically a connection profile. It describes a view of the network. So through this file, the application will know the addresses of the nodes that to connect to, and it is loaded from this directory, fabric samples basic network connection.json. Let me just show you. This is the file, and if you scroll down, you'll see the addresses. The address of the orderer, address of the peer, and address of the CA. So CCP was your a view of the network. So now we have connected to the network. Now it's time to get a channel that our FabChat chain code is deployed onto. So this is the command for it, and you simply have to provide the channel ID here, and that will vary depending on the channel ID you choose for your application. And the next step will be, of course, to get the FabChat chain code. And the next step will be to connect to a peer address defined in your connection profile, and we'll send a transaction proposal. And the commands to do that differ on the basis of what actually you're trying to achieve. So for example, you can query all messages. You can query message by ID. In that case, you have to provide the message ID as an argument here. And then you have this create message transaction. You pass your message text and the email ID. And you can also flag message, and you just have to pass the message ID of the message you want to flag. Okay. So, but beware that there's two different functions that I'm using: evaluate for queries and submit for create and flag. So the difference, you can check the documentation for it. Okay. So all of this that I discussed, creating gateway, getting the network, getting the chain code, and doing the transactions, create message, passing the necessary arguments, So this all has been done here, and you can check this later. Okay, fine. So with this we are done with the client application part. Now comes the main part, that is the chain code. So the chain code, of course, contains a vital logic of your program. So to do this, okay, fetch chain code. Let me just tear down the network. Start it again. Okay, so we have till now covered two parts. We have covered the network part, and we have covered the client application part. And now the chain code. The chain code is contained in this chain code folder. So if you hit enter, you will see the application's name. So we are into FabChat. So hit enter. The chain code is written in JavaScript, so you'll have a folder for it. If you write in Golang or Python, you'll have folders like that accordingly. And then you have to enter this lib folder. And this is our chain code, FabChat.js. Just let me just open it. Okay. Let me have water. Okay, so our network has been started fresh. Let me just double check the number of containers. Okay, we have 6, all fine. Okay, so the chain code path is of course this. And the key logic, as before mentioned, is that the messages remain anonymous unless at least 50% of the users flag it. Okay, so the chain code will have some functions defined. There will be 5 in number. You can also think of this function as the transactions that will be doing. Just let me show you this transaction. So of course you have this function init ledger, the create message, query message, by ID, query all messages, and flag message by ID. Okay, so in total we have 5 transactions. I'm going to discuss this first 4. The 5th one you can refer to the miscellaneous section to get the details for it. Okay, so first thing first, the imports that we're doing. So we're importing this contract class from this Fabric contract API, and we are importing client identity class from this Fabric shell, and the FabChat class will extend the contract class. In fact, all the chain code must extend this contract class. So make sure your chain code class is extending this contract class. And of course this client identity class, we'll use it to get the ID of the invoking identity, the identity who invoked a transaction. So it will help us get that. Okay, so that was the imports. Only 2 imports needed. Now we are using two global variables that are message ID and it stores the message ID of the last message that was posted, and by default it is initialized to -1. And we have a users array that stores the user ID of all registered users, and of course initially it will be initialized to empty. So as you can see, two global variables. Now I want to point out that using global variables is actually not recommended for all the states that you need to maintain. It's recommended to put in the blockchain itself. So for getting the FAPCHA chain code which doesn't rely on these global variables, so you can contact me. But that's a bit more advanced. Okay. Now we have to talk about the asset, how an asset looks like. So, an asset, as Professor mentioned, it's a key value pair. So in this case, we have a message ID and a message pair. And this message, in fact, is an object, a JavaScript object. For example, the message object with message ID 2, after getting flagged by user 1, will look something like this. So the object will have this field message text, this, and it will contain the COVID-19, the text of the message, the user ID, the user ID of the poster. And for clarity, I have shortened it. This is not exactly what it looks like. It's more of a like certificate string that you see here. And there will be a flag field. And since it has got one flag, so the counter will be set to 1. And we have a flaggers array, and it stores the users who have flagged the message. So right now user 1 is flagged, so user 1 is here. And then we have the email ID of the poster. U3 had posted this COVID-19, so the email ID here. Okay. So before moving to the create message section, just let me do quickly. You have to enroll the admin. User one. Registered. User 2. User 3. Okay. Now we post a hello message using user 1 wallet. Okay. Before I do a create message, you might want to know how to debug the chain code if you're developing it. So you'll have to see the logs for it. So first we have a command. You can execute this to get the logs of the chain code. Fine. So command succeeded. So up till now we have done only initialize ledger transaction. We have not done any create message transaction yet. Similarly, let me open this world state. So it's empty right now. No create message transaction has been done. Okay. So now I'm going to do a create message transaction. This is my first message into the network. Create message transaction will submit. Now you can inspect the chain code log. So you have some logs printed out. You can see we have create message transaction executed. Similarly, if you go here, hit refresh. So you have this transaction. And as I mentioned in the asset details, so you have this asset and it has all the necessary fields. The email ID, flag is currently set to 0, flaggers array is empty, the message text is hello, and of course the user ID, user 1. Okay. Now, here is your create message transaction. So as you can see, it takes as input 3 arguments. This is your transaction context. You don't need to touch this. Important part is that the message text that you passed and the email ID. And I'm printing the logs here. So start create message, and this will be printed here. So as you can see, create message. Okay. So create message takes as input message text, email ID, and proceeds as follows. You first of all, you need to get the ID of the invoking identity. So you'll use the get ID function. So this is the ID. This is the command line to do that, and this user ID will store the user ID of the invoking identity. And of course, I mentioned earlier that your CTX stub is your transaction context, and it will enable you to retrieve the user identity. Okay. So first thing I do in create message is to just get the user ID who is invoking the transaction. The next step, for debugging purposes, I print these fields: message ID, user ID, and email ID. Sorry, message text, which should be printed here. So you can see I'm printing in logs. I can see my message text was posted as hello. User ID was this, email ID is this, new user added to users array. Okay, so we are creating this, our asset. So I've already defined how asset looks like. So it's exactly like this. This is our asset. And of course, if it's a first time user, then you're going to put the user ID in users array, followed by incrementing message ID by 1. Do note that these are the global variables, users and message ID, as I mentioned earlier. Exactly, I'm doing these steps here. Okay, now the final step will be, of course, to put our message along with its message ID in the blockchain itself. So to do that, the put state function will use, and of course our asset will be a message ID and message. So message ID and message, and this is the command to do that. I'm using the message ID and our message, and you can look what these buffer from JSON string, they all do, I mentioned here. Okay, so this is our put state function, and after that the transaction get the message and message ID gets written in the blockchain here like this. Okay, so that was our create message transaction. So the next step will be, of course, to discuss the flag message transaction. Before that, let us post 2 messages. The same messages I'm going to post. User 2 will post a welcome message. And user 3 will post a COVID message, which will flag later. Okay, so accordingly in chain code log, you can see the 2 create message transaction logs. So your welcome is here and COVID is here. And similarly, if you inspect the web interface, you will have these messages posted. Okay, so now we have 3 users, and each of them have posted 3 different messages. Now let's flag the COVID message. This is the flag number 1. Okay, flag message transaction will be submitted. So let's inspect what change occurred. we flag this message. Let's go here. As you can see, the flag counter has been increased, and the flagger, the user ID of the flagger is put in the flaggers array. Similarly, in the chain code log, we have this flag message transaction evoked. So let's see what it does. This is a flag message transaction. It takes a single input, that is the message ID that is to be flagged, and proceeds as follows. Similarly to the create message, the first step will be to get the user ID of the flagger. So this is the command to do that. And now we're going to calculate a threshold value, means the number of flags that are required to display the email ID of the poster. So the threshold I'm calculating is half the number of users that are registered in the system. And if it's a fraction, then I just take the ceiling of it. Okay. So this is a flag message. Again, I'm printing the logs. First step will be, of course, to get the flagger user ID, then calculate the threshold, and then just print out these logs for debugging purposes. So I'm printing the number of users, the threshold, the message ID, and the flagger. So we should see them printed in the log. So yes, we have number of users. Of course, we have 3 users. Threshold, we calculated half of 3, so 1.5 rounded off to 2. Message ID that is to be flagged, that is 2. And the flagger, of course, was a user 1. So message 2 was flagged successfully. Okay. So after this, we're going to load from a world state the message that is referenced by this message ID that was passed as a function argument using a function known as getState. So you can see here I'm using this getState function and I'm passing the message ID. And of course, after some formatting, I'm getting this message object. So as a refresher, this message object looks like something like this. Okay. Now there's some logic here. You can read this later carefully. But the important point is that this if statement takes care of the following 4 things. Now, a flagger cannot flag its own message. A flagger cannot flag the same message twice. A flagger cannot flag a message with the flag field set to -1. So what is this? When this -1 is put, so anytime the number of flags a message receives exceeds the current threshold, message.flag is set to -1, and this means that the email ID of the poster now it has to be revealed, and this change has to be permanent. So to mark a permanent change, we'll set it to -1, and we'll see later that of course the email ID of the message with flag field -1 is disclosed. Okay, and after that we're going to update the world state with this new message object, and of course reference by message ID. So after that your world state, as I showed you, the updated world state will look like this. The flags is set to 1, and the flaggers, of course, you have the users who have flagged the message. Okay. So let us do a query. Now, since we haven't reached the threshold yet, we shouldn't be able to see the email ID. Okay, so we are not able to see the message ID of the poster. So let's flag it again. Now this time we're going to flag it using user 2. Flag message is successful. Now if we go back and refresh it, you see that the flag field is set to -1. Now this marks a permanent change. This meaning that the message has received the threshold number of flags, and we have this flaggers array. We go to the chain code logs, you'll see flag message, and you'll see here the message to flag count has now reached threshold. Okay. So all that I did, it's here, coded here. These are your if conditions. Okay. Now let's query again. Now we should be able to see the ID of the message poster. Okay, so transaction has been evaluated, and now the email ID is appended. So that was your flag message transaction. Now I'm going to quickly do this query message transaction. So it's pretty simple. So it takes as input the message ID, the ID of the message you want to query, and it proceeds as follows. You again use this get state function, pass it the message ID, you will get the message object, and we are going to modify this message object locally subject to the following conditions, is that if message.flag is not set to -1, then we're going to remove the email ID from that message. And of course, if the message ID is set to 1, then the email ID won't be deleted and it will be shown. Now, of course, you can argue that if you delete this message email ID, will it change the actual field in the world set? And the answer is no, because any changes that you do to this message that are local, and they will not be reflected in the world state unless you use this put state function. So all the changes that we're doing is local. And anyway, we do not show these fields, flag field, flaggers field, and user ID. We do not show this. And then just we simply return this modified message. And after that, you'll see that the email ID is included in query response only if the message or flag was set to -1. Okay. The same thing. These are my logs. Go back, and you can see it's getting executed. Query message ID. The message ID to be queried was 2, and the response that was gathered was this. Since the message was had already reached a threshold number of flags. Okay. Yeah, Professor, I think we are done because this query all messages is mostly similar to query message by ID. So, do you want me to go through this, or?
That's okay. I think you have covered pretty much what is.
Yeah, so any questions I can take?
Okay, so if no questions, then we can close the session then.
Can you show how to create a separate channel for different peers?
I mean, that depends on the network you're using. So right now I'm using basic network, so it has just one peer. I mean, if you want to have multiple peers, then I suggest you to look at this first network. It has 2 organizations with 2 peers, actually 2 peers each here. So in total 4 peers. And to do that, The commands are listed in the documentation link provided at the top. Any other question?
Excuse me.
Yes.
With this program, you are able to collect the details. So how come this is used in Hyperledger for an application point of view?
So right now I'm running everything locally, but when you have this peers and all, they're going to do their own job. But right now I'm running all the orders and peers in my own local machine.
So fine, but can you tell an application where this is used so that it will be useful for other than
Professor, can you take it? I'm not sure if I understood.
Rachit, yeah, can you mute? There is a background.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you ask the question again? I didn't get the question.
Sir, you were telling this Hyperledger can be used with two organizations, and whatever members are available there, they can give their consensus, and then we can use it. Can you give one example where this is applied now?
I didn't quite get it. Like this application. Right now, Rachit has run this application on just a network where you have only one organization. Okay. But you can run the same application maybe on 5 organizations. Okay. So as I said, the application was developed in steps. The first step is basically what is your setup for the organization. So you can choose to have a network where you can have 5 organizations, and then you have a couple of peers in each organization, and then you can define your endorsement policy. So and then once your chain code is written, you have to put the chain code in every peer and so on. Okay. So yeah, so this is
that way I understood this can be used for getting a consensus among our forum of five industry or 5 set of people. So how this will be, who will pay for this, and how it will be used, who will be, when somebody is running this, how the payments will go, like our other
for example, this application, there is no payment involved. Okay. This application is about simply, I said your application has just this property that users can register to this application, and users can basically post messages and flag messages and so on. So this is just one simple application, but which is trying to show you that you see, to run this application there are certain rules, and you know, the organization which are running this application should adhere to these rules, and that is what is done here. Now on the same platform you can develop another application. There are many. For example, you can also create some you know, new currency on this application, on platform. Or for example, I can talk about quickly, like I suggest at the slide I gave you, you know, a link, and you know, which is the link to my website where I manage the blockchain activities of my group. And you can look at there, like students have basically constructed many distributed application, interesting distributed application, and they have presented their work, made a video how this application runs and how they are basically done on the Hyperledger, and yeah, I suggest you definitely look at it.
Can
That will
you,
give you, yeah.
yes, can you give in the chat your website details so that I can do that?
Sure, sure. I will.
And I'm from an industry of mechanical engineering. So
Hmm.
if I want to, other than this Bitcoin currency type, if I want to use it in industry, can I use this so that my data is being recorded and it is not tampered? So when it started first, so that the history is recorded. Can I use this type of
Yes, yes, definitely. See, I see personally, whichever, I mean, side of the industry you are, I mean, as long as part of your work, if you see that as part of your application, you see that there are multiple users talking to each other as part of the application, that definitely means that some sort of asset is documented, and those assets are time to time updated, and you want that your those assets, those were created, updated, and that happened through transactions. So as an organization, you want that you provide temper resistance service to all your transactions that happened in the past. Nobody should be able to change them. And secondly, whenever a transaction is made to update asset or create asset, certain rules of the organization is followed. And so therefore you want that whoever is managing your whoever are the people who are managing this, they should follow that rule. And so therefore you want to write a sort of a smart contract where the people who are managing this are forced to follow the rule. Otherwise, if they don't, then the system will not allow. So but this is a very perfect recipe for, you see, to develop it on Hyperledger. uh, yeah, I mean,
If I
we
if
can.
I if I
Yeah.
if I'm comparing this with my traditional centralized network, and if I want to use it for a quality system of management where a data has to be recorded first and the data has to be, it cannot be tampered. So even after 10 years or 15 years, I will be able to collect the data when it was checked and when it was used. But what is the basic difference between the centralized system and in this Hyperledger? The
Yeah,
only thing, the
central.
data cannot be tampered. That's the only.
Yes. No, data. No, data cannot be tempered. That's one thing. In the centralized system, you cannot say that you can guarantee that the person who is centrally looking into managing the data really hadn't changed certain things. You cannot say, because that's the person, the only person who is in charge of that. Okay. So the temper resistance is, of course, something the Hyperledger provides. The second thing is that just because in the past you had seen data created, transaction create, I mean, used to create data, but how do you know that certain things, certain decision has been approved, and that was approved following a rule? I mean, the rule. It might be the case that certain decision in the past taken bypassing a certain organization rule, and you don't have any guarantee, because even that decision was taken by a centralized authority, and at that point maybe the rule was bypassed and a decision was taken. But in the Hyperledger, because that decision was not in one person's hand, it is collectively decided. Okay, so if it is taken, a decision is taken either this way or that way, then you know for sure that the five people who are involved in, they must have agreed to it. Otherwise, the system wouldn't have allowed it.
Yes, right.
See?
That anonymously they will be voting for things. So all the five things is registered. In case of
Yes.
centralized thing, it is not registered.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Sure.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, if two organizations are the part of the network, if the third organization wants to be a part of it, who will give the authority for it? Because each and every organization will have certification, its own certification authority.
Yes.
If any organization wants to be participate that, who will have the highest privileges?
Yeah. So you see, there will be one administrator. Uh, you see, who will be basically putting it up, and then all these organizations uh, have their own administrator. So you see, that administrator for a particular organization will basically get the certificate from the main administrator of the application, and then the administrator for the organization will then give certificates for all its peer and whoever is setting up. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, and what about orders? Whether the main organization will contain orders or that's admin.
Orders is, you see, one important. We can have orders which are under the control of each organization, or as I'm saying, orders can be under the control of you see the main administrator. Okay.
Okay. Because in few videos they have shown as 5 orders will be there in one part.
Sorry.
5 orders will be there in one organization. Like that I have seen in the videos.
Yeah. Different configurations are possible.
Okay. And one more doubt which I have, sir, about the solo and raft. Which one is the best one?
Solo is basically in a very, very restricted environment where you have the things are under very control environment. So raft, as I understand it, will let you basically use it in slightly more, like there are 2 organizations. Okay, I mean two orders. Okay, multiple orders. But solo, I think it's quite is to be used in an environment which is under control. Okay, so that way I don't think. But again, I have not invested much time into the the existing distributed algorithms. So I cannot exactly tell you the exact difference. Okay, which one will be really best? Yeah.
Sir, in most of the papers they have compared with 1.4 with 2.0. The versions they are comparing, but they are not comparing with any algorithms.
Sorry, can you
especially for the Hyperledger, if you take for Hyperledger related papers, they're comparing only the latency, number 1, and throughput. Only these two they're comparing with Hyperledger 1.4 with 2.0, the 2.0. They're not comparing with any specific algorithms in it. I may know the reason for it.
Comparing, for example, the overall throughput, for example, you see the number of transactions processed. That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Number of transactions they are comparing, and one is throughput they are comparing, and another one is latency. Only the 3 comparisons is common in all the papers. And then they're comparing with 1.4. That's a Fabric 1.4 with 2.0.
So personally, see, for example, one of the I have worked in. You see, one of the important paper that we had in this area is basically about putting up. Managing PKI, for example, public infrastructure on Hyperledger. For our case, we were interested in that. We were interested in basically in the merit of basically showing that PKI can be managed well if it is done on Hyperledger, and that's what we're interested. And many of the papers are interested in showing that certain applications can be basically done on Hyperledger or permission blockchain. But there are, as you said, other papers where you have a very, very common application that for sure that you can definitely implement it on Hyperledger, and at that point maybe you want to see like how good Hyperledger has been as far as the efficiency is concerned. For example, the total architecture, how Hyperledger, first order, first validate, then order, then execute. This is one paradigm. There are other paradigms which execute, order, and validate. So that those kind of results I'm not very well aware of. In fact, all my projects that students have developed are all on Hyperledger 1.4. We haven't really looked into the recent versions of, and so therefore we don't know much about it yet.
Sir, any paper which is related with the deep learning with the Hyperledger one?
Deep learning with the Hyperledger, I think one of the area that people are working on it. I personally don't think that you see. I mean, there's much to be done, but federated learning is something.
Yes, sir. Yes, yeah. Because when I'm seeing the deep learning papers, it's going to the federated learning. But if I go for the federated learning, they're comparing with the blockchain.
Yeah. Federated learning, I think it makes sense because when you have a federated learning, data is all over different sources, and you want to do it in a way such that you have a correct results and so on. So I think federated learning is interesting area where you can see whether blockchain can be used to perform the federated learning.
Okay, sir. Sir, one basic with respect to this, we are having 5 clients and all are in a distributed network. If these forum of 5 people after a time of period they get dispersed, where will be this data available for the first client to go and find out?
So see, at the end, if you whatever if there are overall say 6 clients split over say 3 organization, at the end all of them have the same copy of the data. Okay, so as long as one of the one of the peer is still up, then you can get the data. But if all the peers are down, then of course there's nobody who is keeping the data, so you cannot have it. I mean, basically the system has crashed. Okay, so because at the end there is this one database, but this is distributed across all the 6 peers, and distributed in the sense that they at any time all the 6 peers want the universal copy of the data. So it's available as long as you have access to any one of the peers.
It is not outside the 5 of the peer members. It will be within the server of
same. All peers have the same copy of the data.
No, what I mean to say is, in our hypothetical case, if all the 5 people dispersed, but after some time somebody wants to collect as if some accident happens or something, so they want to collect the data what is available 10 years before. Will the data be available in some other server? Is it possible?
I mean, unless you put some mechanism in place. Otherwise, if all the 5 peers, if they are out or down, then of course the data is gone. But if you have made arrangements such that you actually have a backup copy, then of course you can
in a common server like a cloud or somewhere.
Yes. You can always have a backup.
But for that security wise, we have to whenever we plan the schedule, we should have that in that plan, correct?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have a backup, and of course you want also the temper resistance, but the way you put the data, you have the blockchain basically, so you can have them data backed up outside the blockchain platform at some server, and that data can also be comes configured with this integrity checking mechanism. Okay, because they are arranged in the blocks of transaction, and the header of the blocks has this hash which is the computed on the header of the previous block and so on. So that way, that's the standard mechanism by which you can have the temper resistance.
That's fine. But in case of if a block 1 some data is there and block 2 some data is there, in case of a dispute, somebody wants to know what is in block 1, who will be responsible for reading that?
No, if it is in the within the blockchain platform, like any authorized client can read it. query the data. But if it is outside the blockchain platform and it's backed up in a server, then it's up to who is actually putting it up to have access control mechanism in place. So that's up to. I mean, this is purely outside the blockchain platform. Yeah. So you can have your own basically access control mechanism.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, one more last question, sir.
Sure, no problem.
So blockchain is a distributed system. Even though we have to keep the data in the cloud, why can't we say it's a centralized one?
I didn't quite get it. You said blockchain is a distributed system.
Distributed, yeah. It's
so
a distributed
the
one. The data, we have to put the data in somewhere. Then only the other organizations can access the data.
You see, suppose the system is distributed and it is distributed among 3 servers, for example. Okay. So basically, 3 servers have they try to have the same copy of the data. Okay. So all of them have but when we say distributed, usually what we mean that on this data, if you want to work,
so the data
example,
will be there in
client,
yes, sir.
Yeah, data will be there in all 3 servers. But now the point here is that suppose one client is reaching out to the one server and try to update some data in the database. Yeah, other client is reaching out to some other server out of these 3 and put some update there. Now the point is that distributed, it means what? The way it is done is basically means what? That different transactions are made to different servers and proposing different updates. So therefore, the server one will have
everyone will
one
have the
view
same copy of it.
Yeah, for some time they will have different, but then they have to basically make sure that they actually share with each other all the transaction, all the updates, and finally they should have again the same view of the entire data. Okay.
Or they have to maintain their own copy as well as they have to put it in somewhere else.
Yeah. Yes.
All the transactions will be validated and the final consensus will be kept in all the 3 servers, correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you very much, Rachit. That was a quite detailed lab. Okay then, if no more question, okay then, thank you everyone. Let's close the call then, unless Kumar is here.
Dr. Kunwa had to leave on an urgent work. He asked me to say a word and thanks and to close it.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahavir Jawar, for your very informative lectures, for taking time off your weekend to share your valuable knowledge with us. And we're also grateful for the nice demonstration by Mr. Rachit Rawat. Thank you everyone.
And we have the email ID of Mahavir Jawar, sir.
Yeah, I'm just typing it in. Yeah. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you everyone.